it feels like a very vulnerable position for Putin. And I think that he's in danger of losing the home front as well as losing the conflict in Ukraine.
Gas is leaking into the Baltic Sea. You can see the bubbles in an extraordinary aerial photograph in the World section of the Times this morning. The gas pipelines running from Russia to Europe, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, are both leaking, and European countries are accusing Russia of sabotage. Gabriel Gavin reports on Eurasian politics and culture. Good morning, Gabriel.
Good morning.
It's a funny thing, though, isn't it? Because these are two pipelines, neither of which are sending lots of gas through to Europe. So are we at all clear about who might have done this and why?
The short answer is no. So ever since the leaks were detected yesterday, there's obviously been work that's been undertaken to try and determine just how big the leaks are, how many leaks there are. And the answer seems to be a few, and they're very big. I mean, one of the picture you mentioned from the Times, it looks like bubbles coming up in the Baltic Sea, right? But actually, it's supposed to be about 1 kilometre wide in terms of the amount of space currently that gas is leaking out from. But yeah, obviously, Nord Stream 2 was never brought online as a result of the sanctions imposed on Russia for invading Ukraine. And Nord Stream 1, we'd seen the amount of gas that was being funneled through choked off and choked off and choked off. So I think what's important about this is, while obviously the jury's out on who is responsible, and I mean, Russia being the most likely culprit, obviously, I think it's about severing any chance of a reparation and ensuring that there won't be a situation where we turn around in a couple of weeks and say, actually, maybe we will buy Russian gas as the EU or as the continent of Europe. So I think it feels like finality. I mean, the amount of work that will have to be done to repair that would be significant. And Putin has previously made threats against the pipeline and said, anything's possible, et cetera, et cetera.
So this might be a good thing in a sense, Gabriel, because if you're not always thinking, well, maybe there'll be a rapprochement with Russia, maybe the cheap gas will come back and we'll get addicted to it again. Actually, Germany will have to carry on what it's doing. It's storing its gas, getting it from elsewhere. And the changes, the revolution in energy supply that Europe has had to undergo will just have to be permanent. And maybe that's no bad thing.
I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, for a while, there's obviously been pressure to try and divest from Russian gas, and countries have, by hook and by crook, eventually not through their own choice, been forced off it. There was, I think, this view for a long time that we could, we as the kind of quote collective West could sell tanks and guns and bombs to Ukraine, but still buy Russian gas. And actually, I think the most support, one of the best things that Russia has done for Ukraine's cause is to tell countries like Germany, actually, this is our ultimatum. Unless you stop doing this, we will restrict gas. We will start choking things off. Turbines will go missing and stop working. And as a result, we've effectively now got very, very, very little energy relationship between Russia and Western Europe. And I think that does give countries like Germany, like the rest of the EU, like the UK, a real degree of freedom to kind of disregard what Russia wants and to continue to support that Ukrainian cause.
Let's talk about conscription in Russia. Can you give an idea of we've had various reports of people being shot at conscription stations, a very widespread unrest, particularly among ethnic minority parts of the former Russian Empire. You've been speaking to people arriving in Armenia. What was your sense of the mood on the ground in Russia?
I think there's a real sense of shock, because this is the first time that Putin's war has felt close for people up until now, especially if you're in, middle-aged or you're a pensioner. Your understanding of the war comes from television, but now it's your grandkid being conscripted, and it's them going to these rallying points with, large numbers of drunk young men or middle-aged men and people who are partially sighted, some with spinal hernias, some with plates in their skulls, being given rusty equipment, being told that they have to provide their own sleeping bags, being told that they should buy tampons and sanitary pads to take to bandage and pack wounds because there's not enough equipment being provided by the army. So for the first time, this feels like something that is really significant for people in a way that the war previously hasn't been. And certainly, so I as you say, I was at the airport here in Yerevan. It's one of the few places that Russians can fly to without a visa. It's one of the few places where there are still flights. And we've had thousands and thousands of young men coming in, milling around, carrying 3, 4, 5 suitcases, some of them, people leaving for good in lots of cases, because very few people are under any illusion that they could be called up. I mean, they may not have been now, they may not have been already, they may only have their Viny Bill yet, their military conscription card. But they know that if this keeps going on, there will not be a door that is not knocked on to try and find manpower for Putin's war.
Yeah, and that's a great fear for all of them. Just before you go, Gabriel, Vladimir Putin expected to announce the annexation of occupied regions of Ukraine this week. The sham referendums are taking place. The Russian government has said that early results show the regions want to be part of Russia. Give us a sense of what these referendums actually are in practice and what will happen next.
I mean, I think these referendums are very clearly theatrical. I mean, I think the amount of democracy there would be close to zero. I mean, we've seen, armed men with guns walking in and voting in the polling stations, knocking on people's doors and saying it's time to come out and vote. I mean, what democracy could there be here? I mean, even if people actually turned out, the results would be manipulated. And it's been very disappointing to see a small number of Western and actually a couple of German election observers go and say, oh, everything looks normal and nice, because it's evident that that isn't the case. What this means in practice is that these regions, these occupied territories of Ukraine, will be annexed by the Kremlin. They will be considered formally, probably as early as this week, part of Russia. And in Russia's constitution and much of its kind of founding doctrine, any attack on any Russian territories, an attack on all of Russia, and it puts all these options on the table of things that you can do. Putin's very obliquely said, we will take no options off the table, including our nuclear weapons. We're not bluffing. So I think what we will see is a really steep and sharp escalation in Russia's rhetoric about we're under attack and we're facing this existential war. And there are lots of reports that the border, the same one that the guys arriving here to flee conscription have just come through, would be closed as early as the end of this week. So it's especially for young men. So it's obviously an extremely uncertain period for Russia. As you say, you've got the unrest in Chechnya and Dagestan. It feels like a very vulnerable position for Putin. And I think that he's in danger of losing the home front as well as losing the conflict in Ukraine. Amazing.
What an amazing time to be really reporting on this and living through it. Gabriel, really interesting stuff. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's Gabriel Gavin, who reports on Eurasian politics and culture. What an amazing act of cognitive dissonance as well. Putin steals some land, calls it Russian, and then blames people for attacking it.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
But that's exactly what's happening.